It didn't happen. It didn't happen. And I hate to seem like a petty individual for picking apart lies. They gonna keep lying until you say we don't believe you. Like, it's important in the checks and balances of the universe that liars not get to make complete narratives for themselves.
Are you not afraid about being blackballed again? These are some power people.
What do you mean again? These people are not powerful. Satan can't create anything. That includes blessings for his people. That's why, you know what the number one job of somebody that sold their soul in Hollywood is?
What?
Is to act like it didn't happen. They all do the same job. It's a cabal, it's a consortium. They rock with who they rock with and they don't with who they don't. But I'm not scared of being the competition any more than you were when you lined up across from a superior team. Yeah, on paper, they're a better team.
Right.
They have all the assets and resources and we don't. But let us get on the line, boy, and see if that factors in. I guarantee you it won't.
Wow.
Malcolm Jamal Warner didn't die quietly. He died confusingly. One moment, he was on vacation in Costa Rica with his daughter. The next, headlines were claiming he drowned in the ocean trying to save her, except that's not what really happened. And that's where this story starts to twist. Because the deeper you dig into the final days of Malcolm Jamal Warner's life, the more questions you uncover and the fewer answers you get. What really happened in Costa Rica? Why was a beach known for deadly rip currents missing lifeguards that day? And why did Katt Williams immediately speak out, hinting that this wasn't just a tragedy, but a targeted takedown? Something doesn't add up, and we're about to break down why this might not be a story about an accidental drowning, but a silent execution of a man who refused to play the Hollywood game. Stay with me, because once you hear what was said behind the scenes and what the media didn't want you to notice, you'll never look at this accident the same way again. It was July 20th, 2025. The setting, Playa Grande, a stunning but notoriously dangerous beach near the town of Limon, Costa Rica. Malcolm had flown out with his daughter and a close friend. It wasn't a lavish celebrity trip. No cameras, no entourage, just a dad trying to create memories with his child. But those memories turned into a nightmare. According to initial reports, Malcolm rushed into the ocean to save his daughter from drowning. It sounded noble, tragic, heartbreaking. The media spun it fast. Heroic actor dies saving child, except his daughter was never in the water. In fact, she had stayed safely on shore the entire time. So where did that false story even come from? Eyewitnesses quickly clarified that Malcolm and his friend were the only two who entered the water. Within minutes, both were caught in a vicious rip current. His friend barely escaped. Malcolm didn't. Surfers and beachgoers tried to help. CPR was performed for nearly 45 minutes. A defibrillator was used, but Malcolm was pronounced dead on the sand. The official cause? Accidental drowning. But here's where it gets murky. No lifeguards were on duty that day. Despite the area's reputation for deadly currents, no safety crew had been assigned. They had reportedly been reallocated to a nearby beach. Warning signs were posted, but in 2 languages and hardly visible from a distance. You're telling me a globally recognized celebrity just happened to drown at one of the most dangerous beaches in the region on a day with no protection, no resources, and false reports already circulating minutes after his death? Now ask yourself, who benefits from that confusion? Here's the part that's easy to forget if you only knew Malcolm as Theo Huxtable from The Cosby Show. He wasn't just a former child star, he was a grown man who never sold out. While others chased scandals and headlines, Malcolm chose integrity. He raised his daughter in silence. No paparazzi, no social media posts, no reality shows. And maybe that's why the industry stopped paying attention. Because when you don't give Hollywood drama, they stop giving you roles. But just because he wasn't trending doesn't mean he wasn't working. Malcolm was grinding, directing indie films, recording jazz albums, winning a Grammy, hosting a podcast about redefining Black masculinity called Not All Hood. He was building something deeper, away from the spotlight. And in Hollywood, That's not rewarded. It's punished. Malcolm's silence wasn't weakness. It was power. He never complained publicly. He never aired his grievances. But look closely at his choices, and you'll see a pattern. He turned down degrading roles. He refused to dress up like a caricature for laughs. He didn't play the game that so many others played to stay relevant. Instead, he poured his energy into raising a daughter away from the noise, away from the cameras, away from the chaos. That final vacation wasn't just a trip. It was a memory in the making. And now it's a memory frozen in tragedy. But here's the part they don't tell you. This wasn't the first time someone like Malcolm accidentally faded from the spotlight. And it won't be the last. Just hours after news of Malcolm's passing broke, Katt Williams made a cryptic statement during a live podcast interview. He didn't name Malcolm directly at first, but the tone was unmistakable. Katt said, "They always act like it's an accident, until you realize how many people were warned to keep their mouths shut." He went further, calling out the pattern of Black entertainers being used up then erased once they step out of line. Sound familiar? Katt has never been shy about exposing what he calls the blackmail industry behind Hollywood's glitz. And in this case, he didn't mince words. This man didn't drown. He drowned, yes, but what drowned him wasn't the water. It was what he refused to become. That statement sent shockwaves through social media. People started asking, did Malcolm know something he wasn't supposed to? Had he been blacklisted? Was this vacation really a break, or was it an escape? And the most haunting question of all, was Malcolm Jamal Warner supposed to come back from that beach? Let's now dig into why Malcolm's silence may have made him a target, why real talent gets silenced, and why Katt Williams, Terrence Howard, Orlando Jones, and even Dave Chappelle have been warning us for years. Because Malcolm's story isn't just about one man's death. It's about what the industry does to men like him. Quiet, principled, dangerous to the system. And what happened next will flip everything you thought you knew on its head. They said it was just a tragedy. But what if it wasn't? What if Malcolm's death was the final chapter in a silent war he never asked to fight? Because when you step back and look at the pattern, at the way Hollywood treats men like Malcolm, you start to realize this wasn't just about rip currents and missing lifeguards. This was about silence, about control, about punishing those who refuse to play the role they're assigned. Malcolm Jamal Warner didn't just walk away from fame. Fame walked away from him when he stopped being convenient. And he wasn't the only one. Terrence Howard, Orlando Jones, Tyler James Williams. Each of them reached a moment in their career when the industry decided they were too difficult, too honest, too principled. And then suddenly, the calls stopped coming. It's no coincidence. It's a blueprint. The industry doesn't blacklist you with a press release. They do it with silence, with shrinking roles, with creative differences and funding that mysteriously disappears. They make you invisible, and they hope no one notices. But Katt Williams noticed, and he's been saying it for years. When Katt was at his peak, selling out arenas, dropping hits, dominating comedy, he started talking about contracts, about humiliation rituals, about the real price of staying famous. And that's when things got messy. Suddenly, he was crazy, unreliable, unstable, not because he lost his talent, but because he started telling the truth. And in Katt's own words, truth makes the wrong people uncomfortable. He warned us over and over about the private parties, the whispered ultimatums, the way you're tested, quietly, deliberately, before they give you access to the next level of the machine. He said, if you don't say yes, if you don't laugh at the joke, if you don't wear the costume, they cut you off. And then they watch you bleed. Malcolm didn't say yes. He didn't laugh. He didn't play along. And maybe that's why his story ended on a beach, far away from the cameras. Because here's the hard truth nobody wants to admit. Integrity has consequences in this business. Malcolm could have gone a different route. He had the looks, the talent, the name recognition. He could have stirred up controversy. Clout chased his way back into the headlines, but he didn't. He chose privacy, depth, fatherhood. He chose to raise his daughter with intention, shielding her from the spotlight he once lived in. No TMZ drama, No wild interviews, no meltdown moments on live stream. Just a man doing the work and doing it well. But Hollywood doesn't reward quiet consistency. It rewards noise. And when you're not part of the noise, you're erased. Katt Williams, Terrence Howard, even Dave Chappelle, they all reached that fork in the road, and they all chose truth over comfort. Dave walked away from $50 million, not because he was unstable, but because he realized his show had become a minstrel act. Because he didn't want to be a punchline for white audiences laughing at black pain. They called him crazy. They dragged his name through the mud. And then, years later, they called him a genius. Sound familiar? It's the same playbook. They laugh at you when you're alive. They cry for you when you're dead. And in between, they pretend you never mattered. But Malcolm mattered. He mattered to his daughter, to black television, to every kid who saw Theo Huxtable and realized you didn't have to be a stereotype to be seen. He mattered because he showed us what it looked like to grow up with dignity. He could have crashed and burned. So many child actors do, but Malcolm grew. He evolved. He became a man with a purpose. He said no to the roles that didn't fit. He built a career outside the machine. He made jazz albums, wrote poetry, directed, spoke truth on podcasts that nobody mainstream ever promoted. And then he died. And suddenly, everyone remembered him. Streaming platforms rushed to add his shows. News anchors cried on cue. Celebs posted heartfelt tributes and retrospectives. Playlists popped up. Interviews resurfaced. But where were all these people when he was alive? Where were the offers? Where was the respect? They ignored him in life, and now they're monetizing him in death. That's not grief, that's business. It's the same cycle over and over again. When Nipsey Hussle was alive, the media didn't want to hear about his investments or community work. But when he was murdered, they called him a visionary. When Chadwick Boseman was battling cancer in silence, the industry gave him no grace, no patience. But when he passed, they held him up like royalty. Even Michael Jackson, ripped apart while alive, deified in death. So what does that tell you? It tells you that authenticity isn't profitable until you're no longer here to speak for yourself. Then it becomes marketable. It becomes safe because a dead man can't call out your hypocrisy. And Malcolm never got to see the praise, the love, the recognition. All he got was a defibrillator on a beach and a few confused headlines before the narrative was set. Accident, tragedy, drowning. No questions asked, no deeper look, no acknowledgement that this man had been warning us with his silence all along. But some people were listening. Katt Williams was listening. And when he said, "They don't like it when you stay clean," he wasn't just talking about himself. He was talking about Malcolm. Because Malcolm didn't need to expose the industry. His life exposed it. No scandals, no arrests, no humiliation rituals. Just a black man doing good work and being systematically erased for it. That's what makes this so painful, so obvious, so familiar. And that's why it hurts, because the industry didn't just fail Malcolm. It failed all of us who saw something real in him and stayed silent while he faded away. The question now isn't whether his death was suspicious. The question is, why are we always too late? Why do we only give flowers when they can no longer smell them? Why do we only listen to the real ones once they've gone quiet forever? Malcolm Jamal Warner never asked for your sympathy. He asked for your attention. And now that he's gone, maybe, just maybe, we'll finally start to pay it. But if history tells us anything, it's that attention will be short-lived. Because next week, the same industry that erased him will find a new distraction, a new puppet, a new face to plaster across our screens. And once again, the real ones will be pushed to the margins unless we do something different. Unless we finally choose to amplify those voices while they're still speaking, to support the artists who build with love instead of destruction, to protect the storytellers who stay grounded instead of selling out, to stop confusing loudness with greatness, and finally, start seeing the quiet ones for who they truly are, kings. They called him Theo, America's little brother, the funny, lovable son from The Cosby Show. But Malcolm Jamal Warner was never just a character on a sitcom. He was a mirror for a generation of Black youth who finally saw someone on TV who wasn't angry, violent, or broken. He was educated, poised, and for once, we didn't have to decode trauma just to find a sliver of humanity. That wasn't an accident. That was Malcolm. Even at 14 years old, he carried himself like someone who knew his image meant something bigger than him. And for the rest of his life, he never stopped protecting that image. Not for fame, not for money, but for his legacy and his daughter. And that's where this story becomes something deeper. Because most of what we know about Malcolm isn't from headlines or interviews. It's from the absence of chaos, from the quiet way he lived. While others were live streaming their drama, he was writing poetry. While his peers were flashing rented jewelry, he was recording jazz albums. While the world demanded a scandal, he gave them nothing but silence. Not because he had something to hide, but because he had something to protect. His peace, his daughter, and his name. Malcolm was building something, a life outside the machine, and for a while, it seemed like he might actually pull it off, become one of the few who escaped the Hollywood vortex with his soul intact. But that's not how this town works. Because when you walk away from the script they write for you, they rewrite the ending. And in Malcolm's case, that ending came on a beach, during a family trip far away from the cameras and even further from justice. Now let's talk about his daughter, because lost in the headlines and conspiracy threads and tribute posts is a little girl who watched her father die, not just physically, but culturally. She watched the industry ignore him while he was alive. She watched them twist the story after he was gone, and now she's watching them profit from his absence. And yet, in all of this chaos, we still know almost nothing about her. Why? Because Malcolm made it that way. He kept her out of the spotlight, out of the headlines, out of the circus, because even if the industry erased him, it wasn't going to touch her. That's the kind of father he was. Not a performer, not a punchline, but a protector. And that alone makes him a giant. Now compare that to what the industry promotes today. The new kings of Black entertainment. Loud, overexposed, dancing for likes, selling trauma for streams, clout chasing with zero substance, and then wondering why no one takes them seriously when the cameras turn off. This is what happens when culture becomes currency, when being remembered becomes more important than being respected, and when silence is punished more than scandal. Because Malcolm could have played the game. He could have taken those roles. He could have worn the costume. He could have let them turn him into a meme, a punchline, or a prop. And maybe, just maybe, he'd still be trending today. But he chose not to. He chose to be real. And now the same industry that rejected him is trying to rewrite his story. But they can't. Because the truth lives in the cracks, in the way his peers speak about him, in the poetry he left behind, in the child he raised, in the silence he maintained. But that silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy, because the louder you are in Hollywood, the easier you are to control. Malcolm wasn't controllable, and that made him dangerous. Not in a violent way, not in a rebellious way, but in a principled way. And the system doesn't know what to do with men like that. So it waits, it isolates, it forgets. And when you finally go quiet, it pretends to care. Look at the tributes, the headlines, the sudden rediscovery of his genius. It's a pattern. They did it to Chadwick, they did it to Nipsey, they did it to Left Eye, to Michael, to Prince, and now they're doing it to Malcolm, all while propping up the very caricatures he fought against. The industry doesn't change. It just finds new masks to wear. But we don't have to play along, because now we know the game. We know how they treat the real ones. We know who gets silenced and who gets streamed, who gets tributes, and who gets torn down in life only to be praised in death. We've seen the cycle, we've seen the playbook, and we know exactly how it ends. Unless we write a new one, a version where artists like Malcolm don't have to die to be respected, where peace, integrity, and fatherhood are valued as much as controversy and clout, where legends are honored in life, not just in hashtags. and where young viewers don't have to look back decades just to find someone worth looking up to. Malcolm Jamal Warner was one of the real ones, not because he was perfect, but because he stayed consistent. He lived with intention. He moved with quiet power. He stood tall when others bowed. And for that, they ignored him until they couldn't anymore. So if you're watching this and you felt something, anything, while hearing his story, don't just scroll away, because that's exactly what they expect us to do. They expect us to move on, to forget, to let the noise drown out the truth. But not this time. Let this video be the moment we say enough. Enough pretending real ones don't matter. Enough giving flowers too late. Enough letting the loudest voices erase the quietest giants. If you're still here, it means you see what's really going on. So drop your thoughts in the comments, like the video, hit subscribe, and most of all, remember the ones who stayed true. Because in a world full of noise, Malcolm Jamal Warner was a symphony of silence, and it's time we finally listened.